Nobody looks twice at a homeless man sleeping under a bridge. Not the joggers who pass him every morning. Not the drivers who roll up their windows at red lights. Not the city that stepped over him like he was part of the pavement. Until the night he pulled a stranger's daughter out of a burning car, and disappeared before anyone could even ask his name. The crash happened fast. 1 second, headlights were cutting through the dark road above the underpass. The next, metal screamed against metal, and a silver car flipped twice before slamming into the concrete pillar below the bridge. Smoke curled up from the engine. Then a spark. Then fire. Inside the car, a young woman hung upside down, held in place by her seatbelt, blood running into her eyes. She was awake. She was terrified. And she was alone. Help. Somebody help me. Her voice cracked against the empty street. No cars stopped. No one was near. Just the fire, growing louder, hungrier, climbing toward the gas line. Under the bridge, in a nest of blankets and cardboard, a man opened his eyes. He didn't hesitate. He ran. Ragged clothes. Torn shoes. A man the world had learned to walk past, and in that moment, the only person willing to run toward danger instead of away from it. He reached the car as the flames reached the dashboard. He wrenched at the door. It wouldn't move. He punched through the shattered window instead, ignoring the glass tearing into his knuckles, and pulled at the seatbelt until it finally gave. He dragged her out just as the flames swallowed the front seat. 10 seconds later, the car exploded. He carried her to the sidewalk, laid her down, and pressed 2 fingers to her neck. A pulse. Weak, but there. Sirens began to wail in the distance. He looked at her one more time. Then he turned, and disappeared into the dark, leaving nothing behind but a torn piece of his jacket, still clenched tight in her fist. 3 days later, she woke up in a hospital bed with white sheets, a private room, and a name the whole city knew. Ava Whitfield. Only daughter of billionaire Richard Whitfield. She opened her eyes, looked at the machines around her, and asked the only question that mattered. Who saved me? No one had an answer. Because the man who saved her didn't want to be found. And no one yet understood why. His name was Daniel Reeves. He was 34 years old. And for the past 2 years, the space under Riverside Bridge had been the only place he could call home. Every morning started the same way. He folded his blanket, tucked it behind a loose stone, and walked the 3 miles into the city to collect cans. Store owners knew his face by now, not because they cared, but because they wanted him gone. Move along. You're scaring off customers. He didn't argue. He never argued. He just picked up his bag and walked to the next block, the next alley, the next place where nobody would look at him twice. People stepped around him like he was a crack in the sidewalk. A woman in a business suit clutched her purse tighter when he passed. A group of teenagers laughed and filmed him for a few seconds before losing interest and walking on. Nobody saw the ring on his finger. Worn thin, but still there. Nobody saw the folded photograph he kept in his jacket pocket, a woman with a warm smile, a little girl on her lap. He never showed it to anyone. He barely let himself look at it. Sometimes, late at night, he'd whisper words to himself that didn't make sense to anyone who might overhear. The company. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Then he'd fold the photo away, and the world would go back to seeing nothing but a man with nowhere to go. Across the city, in a hospital wing reserved for people whose names made headlines, Ava Whitfield opened her eyes to soft lighting and the smell of expensive flowers. Her father was already at her bedside. He hadn't slept. He hadn't left. Dad. Don't talk. Just rest. You're safe now. Who saved me? The doctors said someone pulled me out before. I don't know. I don't care. You're alive. That's all that matters to me. But it mattered to her. It mattered more than anything. Richard Whitfield built his empire from nothing, and he'd spent every year since making sure nothing could ever touch his daughter again, not after the last man who claimed to love her turned out to only love her trust fund. He watched her sign the breakup papers with shaking hands 2 years ago. He swore he'd never let her get hurt like that again. So when she pushed herself up in the hospital bed and said she needed to find her rescuer, his answer came fast and flat. Absolutely not. Dad, he saved my life. He's probably some drifter hoping you'll show up with a reward. Let security handle it. Write a check, and move on. You didn't see him. I felt his hands pull me out. I heard him check if I was breathing before he ran. He didn't stay for a reward. He didn't stay for anything. Richard's jaw tightened. He'd heard this tone before, the same stubborn hope that got her hurt the last time. People don't do things for nothing, Ava. Everyone wants something. Maybe you're wrong about that. He didn't answer. He just shook his head and looked away, the way he always did when he'd already decided the conversation was over. But Ava wasn't finished. Something about the man who saved her didn't fit anything her father believed about people. He hadn't waited for thanks. He hadn't waited for a camera, a headline, a payout. He had simply done what was right, and vanished like he wanted no part of the world knowing his name. That kind of restraint wasn't something you could fake. She swung her legs over the side of the bed, ignoring the ache in her ribs, and reached for the small plastic bag the nurses had given her, her personal items from the crash. Inside was a torn scrap of fabric. Rough, faded, still smelling faintly of smoke. She unfolded it slowly. Stitched into the inside seam, barely visible, was a name. D. Reeves, Kingston and Reeves Holdings. She stared at it for a long moment, the name meant nothing to her yet. But it would mean everything to her father. Because Kingston and Reeves wasn't just some company. It was a name buried in the earliest pages of Whitfield Industries' history, a company her father's empire had swallowed whole, years before she was even old enough to understand what an acquisition meant. Ava didn't wait for her father's permission. 2 days after leaving the hospital, she hired a private investigator and gave him one job. Find the man who saved me. His name might be D. Reeves. When Richard found out, he didn't yell. He went quiet, which was worse. You hired someone to chase down a stranger off the street. He saved my life. I want to thank him properly. You're not thinking straight. You almost died, Ava. That kind of thing messes with your head. You start seeing a hero where there's just some man who got lucky. He didn't get lucky. He ran into a burning car. And now you're obsessed with him. I'm grateful. There's a difference. Richard rubbed his temples, the way he always did when he'd already made up his mind and was only pretending to listen. Let it go. Whoever he is, he doesn't want to be found. That should tell you something. But it told Ava the opposite. A man who didn't want a reward, didn't want a headline, didn't want anything, that wasn't suspicious. That was rare. It took the investigator 11 days to find him. Under the bridge, wrapped in a blanket against the cold, Daniel looked up and saw her standing there in a coat that cost more than most people made in a month. He stood immediately, ready to walk. Please, wait. You shouldn't be here. I just want to say thank you. You saved my life and you didn't even stay to hear my name. I know your name. He said it flatly, then looked like he wished he hadn't. You knew my name before I told you. How? I didn't. It doesn't matter. You're okay. That's all I needed to know. He turned to leave. She stepped in front of him. At least let me do something. Food, money, anything. I don't want your money. The words came out harder than he meant them to. He softened, just slightly. I'm glad you're alive. That's enough for me. He walked away into the dark, and Ava stood there, more certain than ever that this man was hiding something far bigger than a reason to avoid a reward. She came back the next week. And the week after that. She never brought money. Just food, sandwiches, coffee, things easy to refuse and hard to throw away. Slowly, the silence between them got shorter. He started talking. Not about himself. About the weather, about the birds that nested near the bridge, about anything that kept the conversation far from his own life. Then one evening, she made a mistake. My father's hosting an event next month. Whitfield Industries turns 20 years old. It's strange to think about, how much he's built. Daniel went still. Whitfield Industries. Yes. Why? Nothing. It's nothing. But his face had already betrayed him. Something had drained out of it, color, breath, composure, all at once. You've heard of my father's company. Everyone's heard of Whitfield Industries. That's not what that look was. I should go. Daniel. It was the first time she'd used his name. He froze at the sound of it, like it had reached somewhere he'd buried a long time ago. I have to go. He walked off fast, faster than she'd ever seen him move, and this time, she didn't follow. She sat there in the cold, staring at the empty space where he'd been, one question burning brighter than all the others. How does he know my father? Richard's answer to the situation was simpler, and far more dangerous. He didn't ask questions. He gave orders. I want him gone. Today. The men he hired weren't gentle. They found Daniel 2 nights later, cornered him near the bridge, and made their message clear. Mr. Whitfield wants you to understand something. Stay away from his daughter. There's a car waiting to take you anywhere you want, state line, bus station, doesn't matter. Just disappear. They placed an envelope in his hands. Thick. Heavy. More money than Daniel had seen in 8 years. He opened it, looked at it for a long moment, and handed it back. Tell him I don't want his money. You're turning down $50,000 to sleep under a bridge. Tell him exactly what I said. They left, confused, and reported back to Richard, who was even more confused than they were. Because in Richard's world, everyone had a price. A man who refused $50,000 to disappear wasn't hiding from something. He was hiding because of something. And that unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. Ava heard about the payoff from one of the men, a slip of information that cost her $100 and her last shred of patience with her father. You tried to buy him off. I tried to protect you. He didn't take it, Dad. $50,000, and he said no. Doesn't that tell you something? It tells me he's playing a longer game. Or it tells you that you're wrong about him. Richard didn't answer. He didn't know how. The investigators' next report changed everything. Ava read it twice before she believed it. Daniel Reeves, co-founder of Kingston and Reeves Holdings, a mid-sized logistics firm, once thriving, until it was hostile, acquired 8 years ago and dismantled piece by piece. Acquired by Whitfield Industries. She read the name of the man who authorized the acquisition, and her stomach dropped before her eyes even finished the sentence. Richard Whitfield. The file went further. Daniel had lost the company. Lost his savings. And in the fallout, lost his wife and daughter, who left within the year, unable to survive what the bankruptcy did to their lives. They cut contact completely. His daughter, now a teenager, likely believed her father simply walked away. Ava sat with the file in her lap for a long time, pieces falling into place all at once. Daniel hadn't recognized her by accident that night. He'd recognized the car. The Whitfield name on the plate. And in the half-second before the fire took hold, he had known exactly whose daughter was trapped inside. He saved her anyway. She found her father in his study that night, the file open on the desk between them. You destroyed him. I don't know what you're talking about. Daniel Reeves. Kingston and Reeves. You took his company, his money, his family, and you don't even remember his name. Richard barely looked up from his drink. It was a business acquisition. Nothing personal. Companies get bought. Companies get restructured. That's how this industry works. He lost everything, Dad. His wife left him. His daughter grew up thinking he abandoned her. That's not my responsibility. I didn't force his family to leave. I bought a company that was underperforming and turned it into something profitable. That's called business, Ava. Not a crime. And the man who did that, the one you destroyed, pulled me out of a burning car and didn't even want you to know his name." For the first time, something in Richard's expression cracked, just slightly, before hardening right back into place. "Then he got his revenge, didn't he? Making my daughter feel guilty. Making me look like the villain in my own house. He's not looking for revenge. He's not looking for anything. That's what you can't understand." She left the study that night with a decision already made. She wasn't going to let her father bury this the way he'd buried everything else. She started gathering records, old contracts, shareholder statements, anything from the Kingston and Reeves acquisition she could find in the company archives. Quietly. Carefully. Without telling her father a single thing. And she kept going back to the bridge. It took weeks before Daniel finally told her the rest, his voice low, worn down by years of carrying it alone. "I built that company from nothing. 60-hour weeks. My wife used to bring our daughter to the office just so I'd remember to eat dinner. Then it all came apart in a matter of months. Debts I never took. Numbers that didn't make sense. By the time I understood what happened, it was already gone. And your family?" She tried to stay. "For a while. But watching me lose everything, watching what it did to me, it broke something between us. She left. Took our daughter. I don't blame her. Does your daughter know you're?" "No. She thinks I disappeared. Better that than the truth." Ava sat with him in silence, the weight of it settling over her like something she couldn't put down. A week later, she found the one piece that changed everything, a name buried in an old legal filing. Her father's former corporate lawyer, long retired, quietly living 2 states away. It took convincing, but the retired lawyer finally talked, his voice shaking with something between guilt and relief. The debt records used in that acquisition weren't real. They were falsified to force Kingston and Reeves into a position where they had no choice but to sell. I flagged it at the time. I was told to bury it or lose my job. Will you say that on record? After 8 years of carrying it? Yes. I will. Ava had what she needed. Proof. Real, undeniable proof that her father hadn't just outmaneuvered Daniel, he had destroyed him through fraud. She should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt sick, because she knew exactly what would happen the moment her father found out she had it. She didn't have to wait long. Richard stormed into her apartment 2 nights later, the folder from her desk clutched in his hand. What is this? You know exactly what it is. You went digging through company archives behind my back. You committed fraud, Dad. You forced a man into bankruptcy with fake debt records. You destroyed his family. And I have the proof. Richard's face went white, then red, the calm control he always wore finally slipping completely. If you release this, it's not just my reputation. It's the company. Thousands of jobs. Everything I built. Then maybe you should have thought about that 8 years ago. You're choosing a homeless man over your own father. I'm choosing what's right over what's convenient. There's a difference. Richard's voice dropped low, cold in a way she'd never heard before. You have the gala in 2 days. Whitfield Industries' 20th anniversary. Every investor, every partner, every reporter who matters will be in that room. If you humiliate me there, I will cut you off completely. No trust fund. No, I don't care. You will. He left without another word. The next night, Ava went to the bridge to warn Daniel, to tell him what was coming, to make sure he was ready. He wasn't there. The blanket was gone. The small pile of belongings he kept hidden behind the loose stone was gone. Just empty concrete, and silence where he used to be. Her phone rang moments later. An unknown number. If you're looking for your friend, the voice said, calm and businesslike, he's somewhere safe. Somewhere he won't be a problem for your father's big night. Nothing personal. Just business. The line went dead. Ava stood alone under the bridge, the gala less than 24 hours away, and the only man who could prove her father's crime, and the only man she had begun to trust completely, gone without a trace. The ballroom was full by 7 o'clock. Crystal chandeliers, champagne towers, 300 of the wealthiest people in the city gathered under gold light to celebrate 20 years of Whitfield Industries. Ava stood near the back, a folder clutched against her chest, watching her father take the stage with a smile built for cameras. 20 years ago, I started this company with nothing but a vision and the will to outwork everyone around me. The crowd applauded. Ava didn't. She was still thinking about the phone call from the night before. Somewhere safe. Somewhere he won't be a problem. Then, near the entrance, she saw him. Daniel stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 security guards, his jacket torn at the shoulder, his wrists red like he'd been held somewhere overnight and only just gotten free. Richard saw him too. His smile didn't fade, but his eyes went sharp. Ladies and gentlemen, please excuse the interruption. It seems we have an uninvited guest. He gestured, calm and controlled, like he was pointing out a minor inconvenience. This man has been following my daughter for weeks. Approaching her. Manipulating her sympathy after the accident. I've tried to handle this privately, but it seems he wants an audience. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Security moved toward Daniel. Ava stepped forward before they reached him. Don't touch him. The room went quiet. Every head turned. Ava, sit down. This isn't the place. You're right. It isn't. It's the place where you built an empire on a lie, and I'm done letting you get away with it. She walked to the front of the room, past her father, past the microphone he'd just been using, and opened the folder in her hands. 8 years ago, my father's company acquired a firm called Kingston & Reeves Holdings. He told investors it was underperforming. He told the board it needed rescuing. What he didn't tell anyone was that the debt records used to force that acquisition were falsified. Ava. I have the original financial statements. I have testimony from the lawyer who flagged the fraud at the time and was told to bury it or lose his job. And I have this. She held up a single page, hands steady despite everything shaking inside her. A minority ownership clause from the original merger agreement. One that was never legally closed out. Which means, Right now, in this room, part of what my father built still legally belongs to the man he destroyed. Gasps spread through the crowd. Phones came out. A reporter near the front was already typing. Richard's composure cracked for the first time in front of everyone. This is absurd. That man is a drifter. A stranger who saw an opportunity. I didn't want anything from you. Daniel's voice cut through the room, quiet but steady. He stepped forward, past the security guards who no longer tried to stop him. I saw the crash that night. I saw the car. I recognized the name on the plate before I ever reached the door. The room went still. I had 1 second to decide. 1 second to think about what your family did to mine, my company, my savings, my wife, my daughter, who thinks I abandoned her because I was too ashamed to tell her the truth. His voice wavered, just slightly, before steadying again. And in that 1 second, I didn't think about revenge. I didn't think about money. I thought about a young woman trapped in a burning car, and I ran. He looked at Richard, not with anger, but with something heavier. I never wanted your money. I never wanted your name. I just wanted my daughter to know I didn't leave her. That's all I ever wanted. The silence that followed was the loudest thing in the room. Richard opened his mouth, searching for the smooth, practiced words that had gotten him out of every difficult moment for 20 years. Nothing came. You don't understand what it takes to build something like this. Sacrifices have to be made. Decisions have to be made. You think this is simple, but it's not. It is simple, Dad. Ava's voice was steady now, stronger than it had ever been in front of him. You always taught me that character shows in the moments no one's watching. He proved his character in a burning car, saving a stranger he had every reason to hate. You just proved yours, right here, in front of everyone who ever trusted you. Richard stood frozen at the podium, the room full of investors and reporters watching the mask finally slip completely off his face. For the first time in his life, Richard Whitfield had nothing left to say. The video of the gala spread before the night was even over. By morning, it was everywhere, clipped, shared, replayed 1,000,000 times. A billionaire exposed by his own daughter, in front of the very people whose trust had built his empire. The Securities and Exchange Commission opened an investigation within 72 hours. Lawyers descended on Whitfield Industries within a week. The falsified debt records. The retired lawyer's sworn testimony. The unresolved ownership clause. It was all there, documented, undeniable. We need to discuss the board's position. Richard sat at the head of a conference table that no longer felt like his own. The position is that I built this company. The position, one of the board members said, not unkindly, but firmly, is that shareholders are pulling out. Partners are pulling out. We have 3 major clients threatening to walk by Friday. This isn't about what you built, Richard. It's about what's left of it. The vote came 4 days later. Unanimous, except for his own. Richard Whitfield was removed as CEO of the company that carried his name. He walked out of the building he'd owned for 20 years, past employees who wouldn't meet his eyes, into a city that no longer looked at him like a man to admire. Daniel's situation moved in the opposite direction. Lawyers representing Kingston and Reeves' original shareholders confirmed what the documents had shown all along. Daniel still legally held a minority ownership stake in the company Richard had built from the wreckage of his own. "We'd like to offer a settlement," Whitfield Industries' new interim leadership told him. "A significant one. Plus a seat on the board, if you want it." Daniel sat across from them, the same torn jacket folded in his lap, and shook his head. "I don't want a seat at his table. I want to build my own." He walked away from the offer, taking only enough to restart what had been stolen from him, a small office, a handful of former employees who remembered him and believed in him enough to come back, and the name Kingston and Reeves, quietly relaunched under his direction alone. No revenge. No headlines demanding credit. Just a man rebuilding, brick by brick, the same way he'd built it the first time. The hardest part wasn't the company. It was the daughter he hadn't seen in 8 years. Ava was the one who found her, a college sophomore 3 states away, living under her stepfather's name, unaware her real father had been alive and homeless the entire time she believed he'd walked away. The reunion happened in a quiet coffee shop, away from the cameras still following the story. Daniel sat across from a young woman who looked so much like the little girl in the folded photograph that his hands shook holding his cup. "I need you to know I didn't leave. They told me you disappeared. That you didn't want anything to do with us. I lost everything. The company, the house, the money. I thought if you saw me like that, it would only hurt you more. I thought staying away was protecting you." Her eyes filled, not with anger, but with something closer to grief for the years they'd both lost. "You should have let me decide that for myself. I know. I know that now." The conversation wasn't loud. There were no dramatic embraces, no music swelling behind them. Just 2 people, quietly rebuilding something that had been broken for far too long, one honest sentence at a time. Ava watched it happen from a distance, giving them space, feeling something settle in her chest that had been unsettled since the night of the crash. Her own reckoning came the following week. "I'm stepping away from Whitfield Industries." Her father looked up from his desk, the desk in a house that suddenly felt too big, too quiet, too empty of the people who used to fill it. "You're choosing him. Over your own family. Over everything I built for you." "I'm choosing what's right, Dad. I told you that already." She used part of her trust fund, money that had come from an empire she no longer wanted to be part of, to help fund Daniel's relaunch. Not as an investor looking for returns. As someone who believed a wrong had finally been made right. Richard was left with none of it. No company. No board. No daughter visiting on Sundays. Just an empty mansion, rooms that used to host galas now silent, and a reflection in the hallway mirror he could no longer stand to look at for too long. The consequences hadn't come with violence or dramatic ruin. They'd come quietly, the way karma often does, one loss at a time, until the only thing left was a man alone with everything he'd once thought mattered most, and nothing left to show for it. 6 months later, the office of Kingston and Reeves looked nothing like Whitfield Industries. No marble floors. No gold letters on the wall. Just a small, honest company with a handful of loyal employees and a name that finally meant what it was supposed to mean again. Daniel stood by the window of his new apartment, small but his own, coffee in hand, watching the city wake up. No more blankets. No more loose stones hiding everything he owned. Just a bed, a table, and a photograph, no longer folded, no longer hidden, sitting framed on the shelf. His daughter visited most weekends now. They were still learning each other, still filling in 8 years of missing conversations, but the distance between them shrank a little more every time she walked through the door. "You're still bad at making coffee." "I've had other things on my mind the last 8 years." Excuses. He laughed, and it was easy, the kind of laugh that hadn't come easy in a long time. Ava stopped by that afternoon, the way she often did now, not out of guilt, not out of obligation, just because their friendship had become something real, built on the kind of trust that started under a bridge and had nowhere to go but forward. Business is good. Business is honest. That's better. You could have taken the settlement. The board seat. Everything he offered. I didn't want his company. I wanted mine back. There's a difference. She smiled, the same thing she'd told her father in that ballroom echoing quietly between them. "How's your dad?" "I don't know. I haven't spoken to him in months." "Do you think you will?" "Maybe someday." "Not yet." There was no bitterness in her voice. Just distance, the kind that came from choosing herself over an empire built on someone else's ruin. Later that evening, walking home, Daniel passed a different bridge on the other side of the city. Under it, a man sat wrapped in a thin blanket, a paper cup in front of him, invisible to everyone who walked by without slowing down. Daniel stopped. He remembered exactly what that felt like. He crossed the street, bought a warm meal from the diner on the corner, and knelt down to hand it over. "Here. Eat something." The man looked up, surprised anyone had stopped at all. "Thank you. Not many people even look this way." "I know. I used to sit right where you're sitting." Daniel reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, a job application for Kingston and Reeves. "When you're ready, come find me. I'll make sure someone gives you a real chance." The man stared at the paper like it was worth more than the meal, more than the money, more than anything he'd been offered in longer than he could remember. Nobody looks twice at a man with nothing to give. But sometimes, the ones who have lost everything are the only ones who still know what really matters. That night, Daniel sat across from his daughter at a small table in his small apartment, laughing over a dinner that wasn't fancy, wasn't perfect, but was finally, truly his. Ava watched from the doorway for a moment before stepping in to join them, a quiet smile settling on her face, the kind that comes not from winning, but from knowing, finally, that everything had landed exactly where it was supposed to.